let's look at 3 levels of what we want to explore here. What, first of all, is the business challenge that we're trying to meet?
With the specific client that we're talking about, the driver, the trigger for the programme was an incredibly high attrition rate in a business support centre, to the level where morale was extremely low, performance wasn't great, and they were very worried. Part of that was seen to be we're not engaging people, and maybe the way we lead people isn't conducive to getting them engaged. How about we try a more inclusive and engaging way? The other problem that it was resolving was that the demographics of that particular organisation are such that within 5 years they will lose a lot of expertise. So people at the front line, particularly team leads and supervisors, need to learn stuff incredibly quickly. Historically, a supervisor would arrive at that position after 10 to 15 years with the company. Now it's 3. So they've got to learn real quick. So this is partly about how do you encourage knowledge transfer quickly.
Okay, and I think you've touched on it, but let's just look in a bit more detail. Who within an organisation would this coaching programme be for?
A coaching intervention, when you're trying to introduce a coaching culture, will only be partially successful if you don't engage the top person or top people. It has to be role modelled. It's not something you do to supervise and say, now go away and coach your people. It just doesn't ring true. So the answer to the question is cascading from the senior manager down to whatever level you think is appropriate. In this case, from senior manager to supervisor, and in some functions now to team leads.
What kind of results have we seen, and what would we expect?
Well, in this particular client, attrition rate was reduced by between 10 and 15%. So it gave them a stable workforce for the first time ever. Partly, there were other things they were doing, but that was very much part of it. What it's done is it's changed the atmosphere in the support centre significantly. And what that has meant is that they can now move on and deal with some of the other issues which they didn't dare deal with. They can now begin to deal with performance issues. Whereas if you're dealing with attrition, and I need people to fill job roles, you kind of accept that performance will be patchy because you need somebody to be on the phone. Now they're in a position where they can deal with that. So I think those are probably the 2 key ones, or 3. So it's lowering attrition, being able to deal with different issues, performance issues now better, and improving the morale and culture and atmosphere in the place. It's a much more pleasant place to go now.
Right, excellent. And finally, anything else that we need to cover?
I think so. Remember I started by saying that it's important to engage the top person in this. The way we did that was to coach the senior manager for 3 or 4 occasions, so that they got the experience of being coached by somebody who was a professional coach. So they kind of understood the question that they were asking. We want a coaching culture, well, can you coach? Once we'd done that, I then ran a workshop for the management level and said, hey, this is what you've been experiencing for the last 3 to 6 months. Now let's go and try that with, you start coaching your people and I will coach you to coach them. So the focus of my coaching has always been, how do you coach the next level down? And after doing that for a couple of months, we then extended it to supervisors. That's now evolved so that there is an ongoing programme of quarterly, you might call them surgeries, where we are available. When I say we, there are now other coaches working on this programme. We make ourselves available for 2, 3 or 4 days, depending on the size of the function, and run 1-hour coaching sessions for supervisors that want it, and managers. We kind of encourage managers to come at least twice a year. We also are happy to run an observed session where a manager coaches a supervisor, and we give them both feedback in terms of, as a manager, how could you improve your coaching, and as a supervisor, how could you approach this session so you get more out of it. Because it's a growing place, because there is it's still an attrition rate in supervisors, they may be moving to other departments, they may be moving to other locations. there's always a need to do a quick 2-hour workshop on, hey, this is how you run a one-to-one coaching session. It's not trying to replace a 3-day coaching skills program, but it's giving them enough to have the confidence to address a one-to-one coaching conversation with one of their subordinates. And the final piece we've done in the maturer departments, when I say maturer, we've been running this in one function for nearly 5 years now. Others are much newer. In the ones we've been doing it for a while, we run a 3-hour workshop for managers and supervisors together on a topic that relates to a coaching loosely environment that links to their calendar. So if they're doing I've got to do a formal performance review next month, we will run a session on how do you give feedback, how do you build people's strengths, how do you set objectives. So whilst it's not coaching directly, it's giving them the tools to be able to have that coaching conversation.
Right.
And that input probably lasts 15-20 minutes. We then get them to practice that for another hour. And then we run an action learning set, which is kind of co-coaching for an hour and a half. And all of those elements are found to be incredibly valuable. So that's kind of the flavour of it. As you can see, it's a whole package. It's not trying to train people to be perfect coaches. It's enabling them to have coaching conversations and much more supportive, encouraging, engaging conversations with people. But it has to be cascaded from the top to make it effective.
Right.